I feel like gaming isn't what it once was. I don't feel excited to play games anymore. I used to wake up early before school to hop on and download the games early so I can play with my friends. It feels as though times has changed. But maybe I've changed. Maybe I'm not putting in the time and effort. Maybe I don't have the creativity or the imagination to enjoy games and fill myself with that sense of wonder anymore. So I thought I would do a little experiment where I took advantage of the Steam Winter Sale. After hours of scrolling, I realized just how much pornography is on the Steam platform. It feels like for every one real game, there's 5 porn games. Just to prove a point, let's do a quick montage. Inside Jennifer, Fetish Locator Week 1, Fuda Fix Dick Dine and Dash, Furry Arena, Last Girl and Fuda Sexpocalypse, Lust Theory Season 1, Furry Shades of Gay, Sex with Hitler, Sex Chess, Hentai Pussy 5, Her New Memory Hentai Simulator, Only Fap Simulator 4, Sex with Hitler 2, Furry Hitler, Sex with Hitler 3D, Sex and the Furry Titty 2, Sins of the City. Before we begin, let's lay down some ground rules. For this experiment, I will be playing games that I have never seen before, so I don't have any preconceived notions of whether or not they're good. And I will have to play each game for at least 1 hour to fully give it a chance. With all that being said, let's begin. Hylics as a game, in and of itself, is not very good. The gameplay, I would go as far as to say, is bad. Mason Lindroth, the sole publisher and developer, uses RPG Maker, which is a gaming engine that basically does all the work for you. And generally what you find with games like this is a sad excuse for a video game, with uninspired combat mechanics, long, drawn-out environments, and incredibly dull progression. While Hylics does fit in the category with most RPG Maker games where you're not going to be wowed by the gameplay or the combat, where you are going to be blown away is with the visuals and the world. I'm not one who cares, generally, about what a game looks like or what the story is like. And frankly, if I can speak honestly, I actually, now that I think about it as I'm recording this VO, I don't even know that I know what the Hylics story is. But despite having no idea what the story is, I talked to every character, every mob, every NPC in this world. I found the dialogue to be addicting almost. I found the visuals to be very refreshing and nostalgic. The abstractness and the absurdness of it, it's almost like if Rocco's Modern Life had a baby with Hunter S. Thompson. I would actually, as I'm walking around the world and talking to all the unique figures and appreciating the artwork, frankly, that's in front of me, I would actually find myself getting angry and frustrated when a mob would run into me and force me into the combat, because I couldn't stand the combat. The combat was bad. I was just spamming attack and hoping things would land. I just wanted to explore the world and look in every single corner to see what other visuals Mason Lindroth had provided me with. I found that when I finished the game, it wasn't because I defeated all the characters or fought and killed the last boss. It was because I had seen everything. I had gone from top to bottom to look for anything new, for any possible dialogue options I had missed, but unfortunately, I had beaten the game. The ramp is not your typical skateboarding game. The first time you boot it up, you're going to think the map is small, the tricks that are available to you are limiting, that grinding isn't as fun as it should be, and you're going to keep messing up over and over and over again. And then you're going to start thinking maybe it's the map, and you switch maps, and you keep failing over and over and over again. Slowly but surely, you're going to start getting away with some tricks, you're gonna start landing stuff, it's gonna feel good. And maybe at the 30-minute mark, you're gonna start feeling bored. You're gonna think this game doesn't have much to offer. But as you keep playing, you get accustomed to the timing, the rhythm, and you get enthralled by how melodical the game is. Eventually, you're going to realize that despite the game's lack of depth, it's very fun just to keep a string going. The ramp lacks some of the expansiveness that more mainstream games like Skate and Tony Hawk have. It's nice to be within a confined space, and your mind doesn't wander as much. It doesn't think of grandiose combos. It's difficult enough just to get over a corner or scale a gap without wiping out while doing it or wiping out after the fact. Despite this, I still found the ramp to be the only game of these that I've done so far that I actually keep coming back to. If you're sitting in a Discord call with some friends just talking, the ramp is the perfect game where you can kind of shut off your mind and shred. A most extraordinary gnome is the perfect example of a diamond in the rough. Save Sloth Studios hit a home run with this game. It starts off very simply with the tutorial giving you 4 buttons, A and D for left and right, space for jump, and left click to throw your hat. The main mechanic being that when your gnome wears the hat, he cannot take damage, and when he does not wear the hat, he can take damage. When you finish the tutorial, you are led to the hub world, which is your house, full of forest creatures that are constantly changing and being dynamic with the game. Whether you have a delusional bunny rabbit, or a lonely porcupine, or an angry earthworm, you are involved in this living, breathing world. And the best part of it is that if you don't want to be a part of it, you don't have to. You can just as easily run across and begin the next level. The core mechanics of the game are incredibly simple. Anyone can understand them. But the levels in the game challenge this simplicity. They take it and they push it further beyond. They make the player work harder. You would think that just from the tutorial and playing none of the levels, you would think, oh, this is a baby game for children. But it's actually surprisingly difficult. I spent like half an hour on the first level. The game is very challenging, despite the simplicity. The only problem with the levels, in fact, is that there are so few of them. The whole game is only 4 levels. I maybe played the game for only an hour and a half, and it flew by. I was actually very sad when the game ended, because all I wanted to do was keep playing more of it. Save Sloth Studios, please. I will gladly pay for DLC or extra content. Just make it happen. So I got this game as kind of a joke. It came out I think it came out literally like 25 years ago. So I was just gonna play it and be like, oh look, it's so cool, like, oh, brand new game, 2022. I could not play this game for the life of me. I think I'm showing you some footage. My laptop can barely run it. This laptop came out like a couple years ago. It can't run this fucking game that came out in like 98. And I thought the controls would be like intuitive. They're not. It's like old games. I don't know. They just didn't they didn't invent WASD yet. So I spent like 10 minutes looking at the controls. Like literally I had a notepad with a pen and paper trying to like mark down all the important controls, like left and right. I couldn't find the binding for right. I only found left. So I tried, I thought maybe, oh, it's like the campaign. I chose the wrong campaign because it like threw me right into the action, like flying and shooting, and it's like beeping at me. So I thought, okay, maybe I should just start like off the ground, because the only the buttons I found were left rudder and increase like speed. I start on the ground, and maybe I can just like lift off and try to figure out what it is. The game it's like running 10 frames a second. I can barely run the game. I really can't state enough how apparently graphically intensive this game is. And so I'm going. You see me accelerating slowly, and then you also see me slowly turning left, and eventually I veer off the runway entirely, and I'm just I'm driving on grass. I'm in a fighter jet driving across grass until I hit the ocean, and my plane explodes, and I'm like, that was awesome. That was the greatest level I've ever played in video game history. And then I get fucking court-martialed, and I laugh my ass off.
A court-martial has found the accused guilty of
fantastic game. 10 out of 10 game. Wouldn't play it again. The only problem is the servers don't work anymore, but I'm sure after the video comes out, the Falcon 4.0 community will come back in arms and let me play multiplayer with them. Every year there's a roguelike that separates itself from the competition. that is the head honcho for the year and usually results in many clones. This year, that game was Vampire Survivors, and while Vampire Survivors is very fun, it is not the game we're reviewing. We are reviewing one of the many clones of Vampire Survivors, which is Gunlocked. Gunlocked, like Vampire Survivors, puts more of an emphasis on the bullet hell aspect of roguelikes. You don't necessarily aim your weapons. Of course, your positioning determines how your weapons will hit the enemies, but you don't necessarily aim it as you would in a conventional sense. And when you boot up the game is very daunting. There's a lot of options you can click on, a lot of customizations. You can decide which pilot you're going to use, which determines what weapon you're going to use. After you choose what pilot, and you can choose certain augments and attributes, you go all the way down to trials, and you can choose a certain trial. Each have 3 difficulties, and once you hit start, you just go. The game kind of begins. No really tutorial, you just kind of are thrown in there. The hitboxes are tricky, and I found myself running into asteroids and enemy ships fairly often. But once you get used to the movement, the game is surprisingly fluid. You find yourself dodging and weaving a lot. Even late game feels a lot more active than, let's say, late game Vampire Survivors, where a lot of times I feel you kind of just end up standing still, letting your weapons and passives do a lot of the carrying. But in Gunlocked, there's some objects that are kind of unkillable, like asteroids. You kind of have to move around and find a path to the least amount of damage. Once you defeat a trial, you'll unlock the next trial, where you fight more enemies, new bosses, in a kind of slightly different world, even though it's all space. Like many roguelikes, you repeat that process over and over and over again. And what makes Gunlocked fun is trying out certain weapons with different passives, whether you're doing beam attacks or laser attacks or lock-on attacks, whether you're going an elemental build. There's a wide variety of options that allow you to test out multiple different builds that could all succeed in their own way. And certain trials can reflect that. Certain trials are easier with different weapons, and your job can either to win as easily as possible or to try and make the hardest build to win with. I usually don't buy games like Arctico. I generally know what I do and don't like, but since I'm trying to expand my horizons, I thought I'd give it a shot. And I wouldn't say I was disappointed, but I wasn't very impressed, frankly, either. Arctico, of all the games, the reason I bought it was because I think on a certain level we all yearn to live in isolation with a couple of animals, and while some may want to do that in a forest cabin-like scene, I think being a scientist on an Arctic expedition is also pretty cool. You start the game off naming your dogs and customizing your character, and the game tells you that you are the predecessor to some big famous scientist who is about to make a breakthrough. As you play the game, it becomes very clear how empty the map is. And while usually that is a complaint for most video games, you can't say that it's not advertised. The whole point is that you're in like an Arctic wasteland with just nothing but a few points of interest here and there. Inevitably, the points of interest are the most exciting parts of the game, but not because they're fun to look at or to explore, but because they leave these little papers, these little notes of people who have presumably passed away, because a lot of these points of interests are abandoned ships, trains, planes, just something. And it becomes very clear that you're not on Antarctica or wherever the North Pole is. You're in some sort of post-apocalyptic world, because how else would the stuff get here? You must be in some sort of modern ice age. Regardless, the notes that you get really paint the picture of the final moments of the people who were there. Some points of interest point back to your mentor, whose research you're trying to continue, and other notes are simply the final words of someone who passed on. And Arctico paints this picture of desperation and obsession over nothing. The notes let you peek into the soul of these people who, like the very wasteland you explore, lived very cold and empty lives. This game fucking sucks. To start with, the game thinks you're playing on a PlayStation 1. It tells you all of the controls as if you have a PlayStation controller plugged in. I don't own a PlayStation controller, so you spend the first couple minutes trying to figure out which buttons on the keyboard correspond to what buttons on the controller. I figured out most of them except circle. Circle seemingly does not exist. In addition to this, the gameplay is you going down a tube and spinning around said tube and shooting stuff that also is spinning around the tube. The supposed saving grace of this game is that the soundtrack is done by a legendary band, The Crystal Method, which I'm sure we've all heard of. The game plays like it's supposed to be some kind of arcade game that steals your coins while you're waiting for the next laser tag match to start. And it does this thing, and I can't tell for the life of me what the fuck the point is, but the mobs, when you kill them, they drop coins. There's no shop in the game, you can't buy anything. But they drop these coins, and when you shoot the coins change colors. The coins go from gold to silver to bronze to black, and you'd think that shooting the coins makes them more valuable or less valuable, but I have no idea. It doesn't, you don't know. I don't know. I made it to like level 5 one time. It was my high score, and I had to fight this boss, and the boss was just exactly like all the other mobs were. It's impossible to tell what your HP is. You just kind of keep getting hit until the game's over, and then you put in your high score tag, and you just get met with existential dread as the game tries to force you into a schizophrenic episode. Wake up. Wake up. Wake up. Wake up. Wake up. This little project has helped restore some of my faith in the gaming community. I found plenty of enjoyable games, even if they were only fun for a few hours. And that concludes this year's State of Gaming. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll smell you guys later.